So I just finished the TED series and I felt like I had to talk about it because it is just absolutely phenomenal. And honestly, I've been a fan of TED ever since the first movie came out. And I actually saw that movie without my parents' permission. It was like this, like the big comedy movie that everybody was talking about, even in like elementary school, because it was just like so raunchy. So like the humor, it was just kind of like building on like previous comedies, but I feel like it was just so smart. And then when Ted 2 came out, this became one of my favorite franchises when it relates to comedy. I really hoped for a Ted 3 like in the next couple years, but it never came out until this show. And I gotta say that it was worth the wait and it was worth the watch because honestly, I feel like Ted's humor is just so good and the writing is just phenomenal. It's just like joke after joke, and especially it worked great in a series format, even though it's different from the movies. I thought it was gonna be like slower, like compared to many other series. For example, like when they extend like the same concept of a movie over several episodes, like it kind of loses its pace, but it's not the case with the TED series. I feel like every single episode had the same pacing as the movies, and it was just joke after joke, and I was just laughing the whole way, and I loved it so much. And it has to do a little with Seth MacFarlane's writing, and honestly, I'm not a big fan of Family Guy. Honestly, I never really watched it. I feel like I can handle Family Guy in very small doses, but I feel like it gets kind of like old after a while, or it gets kind of on your nerves. But I gotta say, Ted has like perfect balance of like nonstop comedy coming at you fast, and like a little bit like slower moments, like Time to Breathe. And that's something I really enjoyed about it. So today I want to just talk about it and some of the things I really enjoyed and how it relates to why I feel like comedies like this one are necessary for the future of comedy in general. So first, let's review the series. So basically, this is a prequel to the Ted movies. So basically, follow like a younger John Bennett with his teddy bear, which is the owner of the teddy bear. Like he comes back to life, and this follows like his earlier years in high school, like the 16-year-old, 17-year-old era. And I gotta say, there were so many relatable moments. I feel like each episode kind of follows like some very relatable things when we were that age, especially with men, 16-year-olds. For example, there's episodes that focus on like John trying to get with a girl, then like some like usual shenanigans at school, like family dynamics. And I felt like it was really relatable in a lot of aspects. I feel like this would have been a show that I would have loved if it came out when I was 16, and that's something that really added to my enjoyment of the Ted prequel. Other things that I enjoyed was the cast. I feel like there was really great chemistry, even though every single character is so different from each other. So you got John, which is the awkward 16-year-old teenager who kind of like keeps to himself with Ted. Then you have another character named Blaire, which is honestly one of the best characters in the series. Blaire is really special because she kind of feels like a secondary protagonist, even though she wasn't in the original movies. So she was a really great introduction. So she's basically John's cousin who goes to live with his aunt and uncle. And I gotta say, those two are really hilarious and they're so different from each other. For example, John's mother, Susan, is like so nice. She's like one of the sweetest characters I've ever seen in any kind of media. She's like so innocent, so pure. And then you got John's father, who is completely the opposite. Like he's like this hardcore Republican, kind of an asshole in a lot of the scenes, but he's just so funny.
It's none of your goddamn business. Look,
All of the scenes John's father Matty are phenomenal. Honestly, I love this character so much, and it worked so well. I feel like the dynamic and like the back and forth banter reminded me of kind of like the first seasons of Rick and Morty, where the writing was much better. And this one just kind of like shows the best of that out of that family dynamic. I feel like every sitcom should have really awesome characters, and everyone knocks it out of the park in the Ted prequel. So the show doesn't really have an overarching story per se, like it follows a lot of the characters' growth as people. There's especially some emotional scenes broken up by a joke here and there, but they're still pretty vital for the development of these characters. I feel like especially Blaire had a lot of really like emotional, more serious scenes that really build them to be just characters. They're not just like these two-dimensional characters that are just there to make you laugh. Like they actually have backstories and desires. Even John and Ted, honestly, surprisingly, Ted also has a lot of depth in some of the final episodes too. And I just thought it was really cool. I thought it was really cool to see these characters grow and like the dynamic between each other. A lot of relatable stuff to real life events and real life dynamics between families, personal desires, and all that. And I just thought it was really cool to see these characters, and I just love the writing so much. And as I gotta say, the comedy is something special. I feel like nowadays there's not many comedies that really make me laugh as much as this one. For example, the last one that I can really name was Borat, a subsequent movie film, which is the movie that came out, the Borat sequel a couple of years ago. But that's just more like political humor. It's not really like that, just like innocent, laugh out loud. Well, not innocent, like it's pretty far from innocent, but it's just like, what to say, like more like stupid, like kind of like just humor that is just there to make you laugh. I would say it's more like stupid humor. It's just like not anything beneath it, like no message. It's just like there to make you laugh. A lot of poop and fart jokes, like kind of like that kind of style of humor. and sexual humor, but it's just, I feel like there's something special about that when it's well written. I feel like there's a lot of raunchy comedies that just don't work at all in every single time period from the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, but this one works for some strange reason. Like this kind of absurd comedy that was like kind of present in the 2000s, for example, I loved, like, for example, Scary Movie 3, Scary Movie 4, a little bit more well-written comedies like Tropic Thunder, which is one of my favorites, Zoolander, which is just some of those that are just so absurd. There are like scenes that make absolutely no sense, but in the context of a comedy works so well. I feel like there's been nothing like that in the last couple years, and that is why movies and series like Ted are so important. Honestly, I'm not gonna name any names, but I've seen a couple of movies in the last couple of years which are kind of labeled as comedies, but they're just so bad. And there's a reason behind that, because the humor is just like so sanitized and adapted for the modern era that it loses all of that edge that makes movies like this one special. So as an example in the show, there's this one character in episode 6, which honestly, you're gonna know which character I'm talking about, but it's just like this character with completely no filter. Like some of the jokes in that one, for some reason, it wouldn't work in the modern era, which how the culture is and all that, but I laughed so much. Like there were some jokes that I felt guilty for laughing, but in the context of the show, it's just so funny. And honestly, I feel like comedies like that one that take jokes to the extreme, well, not to the extreme, like dark humor that doesn't work and it's just there to offend people, but jokes that kind of like play with that line and are not afraid to like, breach barriers. I feel like those are the best. And this show made the best out of it. So going back to the examples of those movies that I didn't like, I feel like most comedy nowadays has to have some kind of like underlying message to it, like some kind of like lesson you have to learn, or kind of some kind of like commentary on like social issues or whatever. And this one has some of that too. I feel like humor that works in that context is good. And the Ted series also has some important lessons, especially in episode 6, like with the same character with Blaire. She has a relationship with another girl, and that clashes with Matty, the uncle, because he's a homophobe. And that episode offers a lot of, like, there's a lot of jokes about the situation, but they're done in a positive way that I feel worked well. And that's something I enjoyed about it. And there were so many like moments like that sprinkled throughout the series, along with all the like juvenile humor, if you want to call it that way. So in the end, I liked it for that. I feel like the writing was really good. And in the end, I feel like everything like just comes together to create a really great series. And I'm really hoping for a season 2. So anyways, I really enjoyed it. I think this is one of the best comedies I've seen in the last couple of years. If I would score it, I would give it a 90 out of 100. I just feel like it was so good, and there were so many great things to love about it. So yeah, anyways, those were my thoughts on the Ted series. I feel like it was great. I know a lot of people are not going to share my opinion, but honestly, this is the humor that works for me. And it was such a breath of fresh air among all the comedies that have been released. Well, comedies, if you want to call them that. Some of them, not all of them, there are some really good ones in the last couple of years, but this is an example of the type of humor that I feel like is still really necessary in our modern age. So anyways, those are pretty much all my thoughts on the Ted series. If you like this video, as always, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.